looking at how do I use numbers in JavaScript and how do I do computations. It's just similar to what we did in a different day, but now we're going to be looking at when you get those numbers from user input. So first we're going to look at numbers. So numbers could be whole numbers, decimals, or scientific notation. Okay, JavaScript recognizes them all. The one thing about scientific notation, they use the lowercase e. Typically in your math classes we use the capital E, or we just write times 10 and then to the power of. But 1.53 lowercase e2 is going to move the decimal spot 2 places to the right. Numbers are stored in 64-bit floating point, so the first 0 bits 0 through 51, they store the number or fraction, okay, and then the exponent is stored in bits 52 to 62, and the sign is stored in bit 63, so positive or negative. You can display a number as a string with a certain amount of decimal places using toFixed. To round to 2 decimal places, you use .toFixed2. To round to 3, you put a 3 inside the parentheses. If you want to round to the nearest whole number, you leave it blank inside the parentheses. So here we just have a variable called number. It's got lots of decimals, and we are going to get rid of those decimals. Okay, just round to the nearest whole number here. Okay. So we want to recall that the addition symbol is used for concatenation as well as addition. So if you try to add a string to a number, you're going to get a string. If you try to do other types of math with strings, like multiplication, division, or subtraction, you're going to get NaN as the result, which stands for not a number. So if you get not a number as a result, you're like, but they were all numbers. Well, then one of them is not. It's probably because you had user input that you did not convert from a string into a number. Okay? We'll talk about that again in a minute. If you calculate a number outside the largest possible number in JavaScript, okay, you're going to get infinity or negative infinity. Another way to get infinity is to divide by 0. All right, so we're going to look at example 1 of the lesson 6 examples. All right, so example 1 is just showing you you can write things in scientific notation. So here you've got a paragraph, it's got an idea of example 1, and then in the script we've got a variable x, and we're using scientific notation, so it should turn to 153 because we're moving the decimal 2 spots to the right. We're just going to replace the inner HTML of example 1 with that. So it is 153. Maybe notice if I change this to like a 5 and hit save and refresh. Okay, now it moved it 5 spaces. So we have 3 zeros plus the 2 spaces from the 5 and the 3. Okay, so just a little scientific notation for us. Now let's go back over here to our notes. Alright, so before we work too much with numbers, we are going to review forms. So the attributes for the form element are name, which gives you the name of the form. You don't necessarily need that. Action, URL of the file that will process the data in the form. We're going to be using JavaScript right now, so we will not need that. The method is the HTTP method for submitting the form data. You can use get or post, and again, since we're using JavaScript, we don't need that right now. Target is where we are going to open the page that's specified in the action attribute. And then onClick is what we're going to use most often to call a JavaScript function. Attributes that are common to input elements, okay? So the type of control, like button, text, or checkbox. And then a name. The name can be referenced by the client-side or server-side code. Again, JavaScript, we're going to reference them by ID, so we're going to give them an ID. Attributes common to button elements, you've got submit, reset, button, or image. We're going to use button because submit and image are going to want to submit to a server, and again, JavaScript is a client side. And then we've got the value. That's the text that's displayed on the button, and it's submitted to the server if you're using server-side code to process the form. So, like I said earlier, you have to be careful. You might get not a number for your calculations, and that might be because you did not convert the text input into a number. So to do that, you use parseInt. All right, so we're going to go to lesson 6 examples and look at the code for entering today's month, today's day, and today's year. All right, so we're just doing a little practice, okay? So we have an input. It's just going to be a text input. The ID is first number, and then the day, ID is second number, and the year, and I have the ID as the third number, okay? Then we're going to use the on-click. So these button is going to use the on-click, and it's going to call the function add by, okay? And then the value is what's showing up right here, okay? So it's what it says right there. You notice we're also going to call a different function called divide by, and I'm just showing you that you can use parentheses to change the order of operations. So if you want to divide by the month plus the day together, you do need to use parentheses. Otherwise, it will go in order of operations, divide by the month, and then add the day. So the result is, and then after this is where I want the result to show up. So what I did was I have a paragraph, the result is, and inside that paragraph I put a span element. We didn't use too many span elements in the first the first course here, but a span element is similar to a div, only it's in line. So this is going to have my result be allowed to show up right here. If I had another paragraph element, then it would show up below because those are both block elements, okay? Unless I changed the display. Alright, so first function is add by, so that's the function that goes when I click this button. And I'm going to take number 1, okay? I'm going to set number 1 to, this changes it to a number, the text that's inside the first number. So this text input here had the ID first number, okay? And then I'm going to use parse int to change it into a number, and then the dot value means get the value out of there, whatever value's in there. Okay, so get the value from this, the element with ID first number, make it into a number. That's what the variable is equal to. And then similar for the next two. Alright, and then I'm going to change the result, the element with ID result, to have the inner HTML say what number 1 plus number 2 plus number 3 is. So I'm just going to make them 1, 4, 7. So 1 plus 4 is 5 plus 7 is 12. Okay? And then if you look at the divide by, okay, doing the same thing up here, just making whatever's inside here into numbers, okay, and giving them a variable, number 1, number 2, number 3. But now I've got number 3 divided by, and again, you must use the parentheses if you want to divide by the entire quantity of the month plus the day. So, the year is 7, so we're going to have 7 divided by 5, 1.4. Alright, so let's go back and see what our notes say next. Alright, so JavaScript to process the form. So you create your form, give each input an ID. So we had like first number, second number, third number. The ID is used to get the data from the specified input. Your form will need one button used to call, at least one, used to call a function that will process your form. Add the on-click attribute to call the function when you want to use it. Most people think that when you click the button it's going to do something, so probably using on-click for this. Create an element that will eventually have its HTML turn to the result of the function. That's where I use the span, okay, but you could use other things. And then you're going to change the inner HTML of that. Then you're going to create your function. So you define and set your variables. So I had number 1, number 2, and number 3, okay? And then to do that, you have to get the value. And then if you want the data to be a number, you have to use parse int. So it's going to be parse int, and then all of that. All right. The result, you're going to set the inner HTML of the element you chose to contain the result to what we would like to be set. All right. So today, your assignment is to do JavaScript practice 4, which is to create a form that finds the slope of a line given 2 points. It should be formatted similar to the image below. So point 1, and then you have to have 2 inputs in the same line with a comma between them. Point 2, 2 inputs, so you can have your x and your y, and then when you click find the slope, it should find the slope correctly.